It's great to see you all here. It's fantastic to be here in Kiev, beautiful Kiev, especially this awesome old building. Thanks for my friend Juuso for organizing this to me, this possibility to talk about my companies, which as an entrepreneur I'm always super happy to do. So my name is Mikael Gummerus. I'm from Finland. I'll tell soon a little bit more about myself, but first, question to you guys. How many of you have your own game studio? Do we have any independent small game studios here? Just a few, okay. What about how many of you guys are sort of the business side of a game, operating responsible for? Okay, this side is clearly more business and game studios. This side is something else. We have interpreters here, so if you feel like it that I speak too fast, it's good to use them. They're doing excellent work. So I have a 30 minutes presentation, and I'm going to, in this presentation, talk about 4 different things. First, I'm going to tell a story of one game. And after that, I'm going to tell you guys some lessons that I've learned from digital consumer eCommerce that could be hopefully applied to game business. Then about our experiences, how to create more sustainable game business through long-term thinking, and then a short summary. Is this okay for everyone? Cool. Let's get to it. And this is a game video. How original. So this is the game video, real gameplay from this game called Drive Ahead, which story I'm going to use as a backbone of my presentation. It's a very casual pixel art game, as you can see. It's available for iOS and Android. You can play it against the computer, or you can play it as a local multiplayer, or you can play it as an online multiplayer over Wi-Fi. And as you can see, there is a lot of crazy stuff happening in this game, which is a big part why it's very fun. So these are all real players that have encountered a funny thing in the game, and then they get featured in our weekly replay video. And we have right now in the game a robot team thing. That's why a lot of these things are robots, but there are also all sort of other crazy teams, aliens and dinosaurs and stuff like that. So now I've spent 2 minutes of the presentation to this video. So now the question is, why am I showing you a replay video from this tiny pixel art game? You guys are working with World of Tanks, huge 3D MMO game worlds, etc. And here's a small pixel art game. Well, Do Dreams is my other company, and for 5 years we tried to develop different kind of games, and we basically failed in everything, and we were literally out of money. And then this tiny game was launched in May 2015, so a year and a half ago, and it basically saved the company. So now the question is, when I try to give you this presentation about sustainable game business, is that was it just pure luck what happened with this game, or is there something else behind it? So this tiny game is quite popular. It has about 1.5 million daily active players, about 8 million monthly active players, and as you can see, those videos are extremely popular. So the gamers share on average 15,000 gameplay videos every single day to web. And most popular of those videos gets hundreds of thousands of views. So it's a pretty big thing for these guys. And we've done, in a year and a half, or a little less, we've done 34 updates to the game, so a lot of active development work there. And company is luckily very profitable now and has been since the launch. Another question is, of course, what should we do next? So let's pause here just for a moment, and now I get to talk about myself. So once again, my name was Mikael. I've been an entrepreneur now nearly for 10 years, and I have two companies. I'm the CEO of a company called Frosmo, and it's not a gaming company, and then I'm chairman and co-founder of this game studio, Do Dreams, which is the second game studio I've founded. So about 15 years in software industry, and in games about 9 years. But my primarily job is Frosmo. So Frosmo was originally actually a platform for Flash game, browser-based games, and more specifically for game developers. And we founded it in 2008. But in 2 to 3 years, we realized that it's a really shitty customer audience because these game developers don't have any money. So we needed to pivot our business, and we were really thinking hard, like, where are we good at? And Frosmo has then merged into become a user interface development tool for digital consumer businesses. They luckily have more money. So what Frosmo is all about is that in e-commerce, the key thing to create competitive advantage is based on user interface. So you need to be able to really quickly modify and improve your user interface in order to create user experience that makes the customers come back to your business. Sounds familiar, right? And for e-commerce companies, it's really difficult to achieve this because in order to run a digital consumer business, you need quite complicated systems. You need to be able to handle payments. You need to be able to handle confidential customer data. You need to be able to add and remove products, etc. Sounds familiar too, right? And they really cannot do quickly enough user interface modifications or improvements because of this complexity. So what Frosmo does is we call it single tag user interface improvement method. And the idea is that you place one JavaScript tag to your site, and through this JavaScript tag you can start developing the user interface independently from your core system. So you can bypass those complex systems and start releasing right away changes using JavaScript at the user interface. So it's a big relief for them. It's very cost effective, it's technically less risky, it's faster, and there's no vendor lock, so great thing. We have companies or customers ranging from retail, travel, betting, banks, insurance companies, etc. We're over 100 people operating mostly in Europe and in Asia. And what do these companies do then with our software? Might be actually quite similar what you guys think you're trying to achieve with games when you're doing, let's say, what do you call, some sort of a triggering of users to buy credits or things like that. So here are, for example, customers from betting industry, which has some similarities to online casual gaming. So for example, in betting industry, these companies try to understand, for example, the balance of the user's account. So how much money do you have there? And then understand how much you usually like to bet. And based on that, we can automatically preset, for example, the bets to make it as easy as possible for you to bet really quickly on your favorite game. And of course, we can, for example, reorder the game so that your favorite game is there right away on the top, so you can easily choose it. And this all happens, of course, dynamically. What we also do, or what our customers also do, is they try to improve the way people add more credits to their account. So how do you make that experience as seamless as possible across different devices? How you make it as easy as possible, the flow, and of course how you encourage them to deposit more. Very similar kind of things as with online gaming. And we've worked with about 2,000 sites across 5 different industries. And you might think that this data-driven development where you do these improvements is a fantastic thing. It's not fantastic, unfortunately. It's really good. It's really important. What we've seen is that if you perform just this, what you might call conversion optimization, on average, you will reach additional 5 to 10% on top of your annual revenue. It's not really like mind-blowing, isn't it? It's really good, but it's not mind-blowing. So nevertheless, we have some customers. For example, one customer has managed in 5 years to grow their online revenue from about 300 million euros to over 1 billion. So what makes the difference with these guys who optimize small little things based on data, try to do those improvements, and get 5 to 10% annually, to these guys who manage to make the leap where they grow from 300, 400 million to over 1 billion? What's the difference? What have we discovered? It's about combining 3 things. So unfortunately, also in digital business, some of the old school business rules apply. You need to have a management who really understands the space where your company is operating at. And it's not just like, okay, we sell retail clothes. We just sell clothes, but you need to understand to whom you, of course, try to sell those clothes, what is the vertical you're playing at, and how do you understand the economies of that vertical and then leverage it. So this is the strategical thinking which is required. So most of the companies who don't do this leap, they don't clearly enough define this. It is not, for example, obviously clear to a customer when you arrive to a retail store site what problem they're trying to solve for me. So this positioning and strategical thinking is very important. But that is not enough. On top of it, you need an operative team who has a mandate to do any kind of changes to the user interface as long as it supports the guidelines of the strategy. So the speed combined with this long-term thinking is crucial. And then the third thing is that because you need to be fast, you need to use a technology that makes you fast. And luckily in the web, it's JavaScript. JavaScript works for every platform. It's basically one cornerstone of modern internet. So you can really release using JavaScript superiorly fast, which means that technology isn't the challenge anymore, but it's a managerial challenge. And when you have all these 3 things in place, you have the strategy, the long-term thinking, the positioning, and then you have the team that has mandate to do any kind of changes to the user interface whenever they like, supporting the strategy, and then you use the standardized technologies, then you have a combination that really works. So let's go back to the games. This 5 to 10% uplift, trying to do optimization based on data, seems to apply in games industry. That's at least what we've seen. And now you're like, no shit, Sherlock, this dude is talking obvious things. But let's look a little bit more about this Drive Ahead game again. So before Drive Ahead, we had a situation that Do Dreams was originally sort of a MMO game publisher. We didn't really have enough money to do our own games, so we licensed some games from China, managed to make about €1 million or something like that to our bank account, and then we started to develop our own games. And we just failed, and all the time we were losing so much money that in May 2015, when we launched Drive Ahead, we were minus 20,000, so practically bankrupt. So now we released the Drive Ahead game in May 2015. It's a game that makes us money. It's profitable. Retention is really good. The idea was at that point, our strategical thinking was that, hey, let's turn this mini game into a massive hit, and we make so much money that we can make more mini games. But unfortunately, that didn't really work. So we tried the data-driven approach. We did a release every 2 weeks to the game, and it might not sound like a lot of releases if you think about you have an MMO game where you can release independently whenever you like, but remember that we are at the mercy of App Store release cycle, so it needs to be approved by Apple every time we do a change. So this is basically the fastest cycle to do changes to the game. So every 2 weeks we release something 34 times. So shitloads of releases, always based on data. We combine like, how do we make this and this funnel easier or whatever, just like in e-commerce. And then we combine some crazy ideas to it, robot teams, alien teams, etc. And the sad fact is that after 34 releases, what we managed to do was to keep the game basically stable, or if we were really good, maybe we've added maximum 10%. So shitloads of work. We're geniuses. We read data. We do improvements. In a year, 10% more. Not really a pleasant situation, unfortunately. As a chairman of the board, I'm of course responsible that the company is sustainable. It needs to, grow, continue to grow, and we cannot have a risk that, hey, suddenly we fuck up this drive ahead, the only game, and again we are in this situation where we're running out of money. We have €1 million in the bank account, and we're again in a situation where we're running out of money. So then the team is like, hey, let's just stick to the mini game strategy. It was really good. It got us this far. Let's make a new mini game. Let's make shitloads of mini games again. But now, if you remember, even we managed to get this amazing hit from mini game, it just leveled up to this. And even if we used data to do these releases and updates, we managed to make it significantly bigger. So it was not really a viable strategic option. So we sat down with the team multiple times, multiple evenings, a lot of beer, whatever, and tried to think like what on earth we should do. We still don't have enough money to make a really massive game, which would be monetized using in-app purchases and could make much more money than Drive Ahead is making, or at least sustain a risk of it. And the mini games are really difficult to turn into massive hits, and then starting, random game project. Even the team has a lot of ideas. Seemed very difficult because we had failed so many times before having this one hit. So I really didn't think it as a viable option. So we needed to, despite of having like small 15, 20 people rock and roll team, I then encouraged them that we need to start building this long-term thinking. And we sort of started to distill it into 3 things. I'm sorry I have to come to this side because I can't read, that's so small, the thingy there. So we distilled it to do 3 things which we've actually used also in e-commerce. So R&D is obviously very important. How do we define what kind of drive ahead games are? How do we analyze the vertical we're operating at, and how do we model the game development itself? Because we had a small team, basically all working on just with this drive ahead, and it was very random. Then the second thing is obviously user acquisition. We have managed to build this awesome, strong community around Drive Ahead, and we even managed to create these cross-promotion features, so we're probably pretty good at that. And the third key thing in our long-term thinking was then distribution. How do we solve that? And we decided that we need to really focus on creating continuous dialogue with Apple and Google. Because if we don't get featured, we don't get gamers. It's just dead end. And also, we wanted to reduce the risk of not getting featured by cooperating with other game studios. So we decided that let's form a friendship where we can exchange gamers without using any money. And we also thought something more about the distribution, like how do we use this original drive ahead game and concept to test other game concepts. So we did something what sort of business schools teach, and we went and tried to look at a lot of data, but this time not necessarily from the perspective how our players game drive ahead, but what is the market where drive ahead as a game is, what kind of players they are, what kind of things work in successful games for that particular gaming segment. And then based on all of this data and multiple sessions, we sort of managed to create like 7 rules for drive ahead games. So this is how they need to be. So for example, physics is very important. Then there are a few top secrets which the team strictly has forbidden me to tell about. Local and online multiplayer, they're important for our games. The art style, you know, this classic pixel art thing is very important for our games. There has to be a lot of random elements in our games. So okay, fantastic. This was the conclusion of a lot of thinking for our long-term strategical work. So then we started to execute it. So now in R&D, it's not a random thought that, hey, we have a fantastic game idea, but actually we have now a roadmap. You're allowed to do for this kind of gamers, with these 7 rules or 7 definitions, what is a drive-ahead game, any kind of game then. But it has to apply these rules. And we also analyzed, like, how many people do we actually need to operate this game and what talent is required there. And we managed to model it so that we need actually only 5 full-time people per each game. And surprisingly, it's very close to Supercell's team sizes. So maybe there is some truth that in mobile games you don't actually need that much more people. And then we created these rules and ladders, like what needs to happen for the team to start recruiting before they can start recruiting the next team. And now we have a rough roadmap for 2 years, and they're allowed to quickly modify and kill even game ideas, but they just need to follow those strategical rules we've set. And then for the user acquisitions, you saw that game replay video in the beginning. We decided that, hey, it's not just about those people who play the game, but we need to create a community around it. And luckily we have this content which also people who don't necessarily have time to play that game enjoy it, because those are pretty funny, crazy videos. So we have about 8 to 10 million people monthly engaging somehow with the game, and now we're putting a lot of effort to it, that what else can we do for these guys except just provide the game. So we're now coming out with Drive Ahead TV, where we have like hosts and stuff like that. And then the third thing is that we're now really much better at communicating with the stakeholders. So we have shared very transparently this roadmap with Apple and Google. So they know what kind of games we have coming here and there, and we send them materials early on, right away, even if it's a sketch. And they have even told us about a couple of things that, hey, we don't think you should do this, or this doesn't actually look good. And then the team has changed their focus. So that's been a really cool change in the company. So what we did was the team came up with an idea that, hey, because now the original game is really violent, you have to hit the opponent's head with your car, etc. How about we make a non-violent version of it, sports version? We could use this physics engine and all those 7 criteria would fit to this sports version. And then we decided that we're not going to actually start making the game before we've tested it around our assumptions. So we promoted to the community just by creating some design elements, and people reacted really well to it. So then we were like, okay, what we're going to do is when we create the minimum viable playable version of this, we're actually putting it inside the drive ahead game. So we put a new game inside that original game, and we tested what was the reaction, and people really loved it. It was called Summer Specialty, and it was hugely popular. So all that then encouraged us that, okay, we can actually do this real game, and that will be launched in 2 weeks, called Drive Ahead Sports. So this is on the left. You can see the original Drive Ahead, and you can see that when you choose the game mode, there was this. Oh, the screen is pretty bad, but there's this football there, so you could choose this soccer mode, and then there's the soccer game. So it looks like Drive Ahead, but it used different rules, and it was like an independent minigame inside a minigame. And now they've converted it into real proper game, which they've developed, and it has totally different kind of systems, and it's adding not just football, but also boxing and basketball and things like that. So let's see what happens with it. Unfortunately, I'm not able to tell yet if our strategy is correct or not, but at least I'm very happy as a chairman of the board that there's some sense in what the team is now doing. Which brings me to the last slide, which is the summary slide. So summary is basically, wanted to say 3 things. So just doing data-based iterative development, unfortunately, is not going to blow the business for you. If it would be that simple, all the games would be really successful. So you need to understand the market and where you want to be. That's really important work. We needed to at least put a lot of effort to it. And then we need to create these rules of our long-term thinking, meaning strategy, old school business stuff. And then on top of that, you do the optimization to get to that additional 5 to 10% every year, every single year, and to keep your users engaged. And that was my presentation. Thank you very much. So now we have 15 minutes for questions. Yeah.
Hi. You've said that
Wow.
It's rather dangerous to have only one successful game, so you decided to make one more, but you've reused the same user base, so if you lose users from one of your games, you will also lose them from the other. So they are the same.
Yeah, we spoke about that, and the truth is that if you look at App Store and the different game verticals you have there, from the racing category, we've reached 1% market share. So there's 99% left of the gamers. So we're not really too worried about that. And then what we've done is this careful analysis of to what other, segments do we spread to. So sports isn't, Drive Ahead Sports isn't anymore a racing and action game. It's sports and racing. So we're gradually adding more categories, and the third game will again have gradually more categories. So we try to extend from one category towards another, and for our 2 years roadmap, we have painted a table that in these categories, in these game categories or genres, we need to be at.
Yeah, but you said that you took your Drive Ahead and used the same principle. So Drive Ahead Sports it's Drive Ahead plus soccer, for example, but it's not a soccer game because in sports games there are completely different rules, which may not apply to your Drive Ahead completely. So it's I thought it was just Drive Ahead with something like more. A patch mode, new mode, but it's not a completely sports game that the users that didn't play your driver head will use. Mainly.
When we analyzed different game families, what we discovered is that you cannot jump too far from your original genre when you start to do these extensions, because then it's too confusing for your core audience related to the brand what you managed to create. So that's why we have this step-by-step gradual progress. And I'm not too worried about the driver-head sports itself. Let's see what the situation is once we are at that fourth game and we have extended to certain amount of genres. As I said, it would be great if I could have shown you figures like, do we really start to get new kind of audience or not, but the launch is in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you.
So you talked about the strategy and those 7 steps.
Mm-hmm.
Did you at any point think of the brand itself? Like, what does the brand drive ahead mean, and so forth? So those 7 steps are obviously your internal guide, but what about externally?
Yeah, that's these guys who work day to day in game business and at that studio. When I started to introduce that we need to have this kind of thinking there, and I also instructed that you need to create a brand guidelines and sort of a brand modeling which is a little bit independent, requires a little bit of different thinking than making the games. There was a pretty big rebellion. They refused basically first to do it, but now they've seen the light and now they're preparing it. But applying all of this to small, game developers who are really doing it straight from the heart with a lot of passion, it's quite difficult to actually make them have that change in their mentality. All right, thank you very much.